On this video, we'll break down 5 fights for UFC 263. I'm Alan Seslowski here with Jon Litterine. Stay to the end to hear Jon's underdog lock for UFC 263. Jon, let's start with the main card. We'll start with Craig versus Hill.
Well, Craig versus Hill is an interesting fight because it's your classic grappler-striker battle. Paul Craig is kind of limited athletically, doesn't offer a ton on the feet, but he's durable, and he's always been able to crank submissions from anywhere. And it's always been his biggest strength because often when a guy who doesn't have a ton of power in his hands can really struggle with durability issues simply because he gets hit more often because he can't threaten his opposition. Paul Craig has somehow managed to remain durable and still rack up those submissions. Going against an opponent in Hill who is the opposite of him in the total sense that it's all about power. There's a big gap in the explosiveness. There's a big gap, obviously, in the power in the hands. But the one advantage Craig has in this fight, in addition to his mat skills, is that if this fight goes into the later rounds, he's going to have an edge. I think he has a cardio edge. He certainly has an experience edge. So I don't think he's going to win, but I don't think Paul Craig's the worst play in the world, given we haven't seen a ton from Hill and the fact he should have an edge if this goes into later rounds.
So at plus 250, is Craig a live underdog for value purposes?
I think he's a live underdog simply because I think Hill's path to victory is kind of limited in the sense that it's probably going to be an early stoppage.
One of the all-time underrated fighters in the welterweight division is Damian Maya. He's a plus 175 versus Muhammad at a minus 225. Is there an underdog play to be had here, or is Damian Maya just more name value at this point?
I certainly think he's more name value at this point than anything else. But look, I give Damian Maya a lot of credit. This is a guy who, when you go back to like middle 2017, early 2018, he looks like he was done. Like, I would have guessed Damian Maya was absolutely finished. He's rebounded to win 3 of his last 4 fights. It's been I expected a steeper decline over a short period of time than what we got, but somehow he's kind of remained competitive. Now, he's facing an opponent here in Belal Muhammad who is not as good as some of the guys he's facing recently. He's not Gilbert Burns. He's not Kamaru Usman. He's not any of those kind of guys. But Belal Muhammad's good. And not only is he good, he's always been underrated. Now, this is kind of a little similar to the last fight we just spoke about. Damian Maya's advantage, as it is in any fight he ever had throughout the course of his career, is all about his ability to get his opponent to the ground and tap him out. One of the greatest submission specialists in the history of the sport, Damian Maya. But you're looking at a significant gap now in both age and athleticism that favors Belal Muhammad. I wouldn't be surprised if Maya kept it competitive. I don't think he wins.
When you talk about a fan favorite, there is none greater than Nate Diaz, who is a plus 365 underdog. He's facing Leon Edwards.
Yeah, so I've said this for a long time, and I maintain it. I truly believe that both Diaz brothers enjoy fighting. They enjoy the training camp, they enjoy the camaraderie, they enjoy being in the octagon and everything that goes with it. We know they don't love the media obligations and all that kind of stuff. And obviously we know we're not going to get either of them into the octagon without a massive payday. So in that aspect, I think Diaz is going to show up ready to fight. I don't think he's going to be lazy and skip training sessions and not show up ready to go. The difference is there's such a massive gap in talent level between, at least in this point in his career, between him and Leon Edwards. Now, as far as Edwards goes, this is a guy who has barely fought. He had a couple fights canceled throughout the course of the pandemic, and then he recently had in his most recent bout, he actually fought the previously mentioned Belal Muhammad, and an eye poke early in the second round caused that fight to be ruled a no contest. Edwards looked fine in the first round. He was winning, and it was a real tough break for Muhammad because this was Muhammad's first fight in the first main event opportunity in the UFC, and he was really broken up about it, and understandably so. It was a vicious eye poke, was accidental, was not done on purpose. But again, Leon Edwards at this point, he just needs the reps. He'd been on the sidelines since July of 2019 prior to that fight, and when you're talking about high-level guys, and Leon Edwards is probably maybe 2 more wins now away from earning a title shot. Like, this guy's top of the top. And in order to get to that point, you got to step into the octagon. So I expect a strong showing from Edwards. I think he wins easily. That's not discounting Diaz. I'm sure Diaz will be ready to go. I still think Edwards wins.
casual fight fans may not be as familiar with Frigato versus Mourinho. Who do you like in this fight, and how's it going to play out?
So this is interesting. These two guys fought not all that long ago in a fight that was an absolute war. It was actually this past December, so it was, within the last, 6 months or so. It was ruled a majority draw. It was a fight that Deiveson Figueiredo would have won had he not been docked a point. The point was correctly taken by the referee, so obviously that's Figueiredo's fault. You can't foul your opponent. But he was a massive favorite in that fight, and he's a pretty big favorite in this fight too. And I'm rolling right back with him. The one thing you can say about the first fight between the two is there's a massive gap in athleticism and talent between the two. Brandon Mourinho got by in the first fight on guts and guile. There was a gap as far as the power, as far as the damage. And the way I'm looking at it is Mourinho somehow survived that first fight despite everything Figueiredo threw at him. He ate everything Deiveson threw at him without issue, kept coming. As far as I'm concerned, Figueiredo is probably the most powerful puncher in the division. The odds of Mourinho, about 6 months after the first fight, being able to survive that kind of beating again are small. If you told me Figueiredo is going to land at the same rate he landed in the first fight, I don't think Moreno's able to survive it. It was an epic performance by Mourinho the first time. He deserves the rematch. I have no problem with them running it back again, but just looking at the two men, there's a gap between the two as far as talent, as far as natural ability. And hey, if Mourinho goes out and somehow survives another beating and ends up taking Figueiredo's belt, more power to him. But I think a lot of things are going to have to break right for that to happen.
The main event, Marvin Vittori versus Israel Adesanya. Adesanya is a minus 265 and Vittori is a plus 210. Is this going to be our big underdog play?
It is for me. I don't know why I'm doing it, but this is where I'm rolling and where I'm making my stand. We all know how good Israel Adesanya is. His most recent fight against Jan Blachowicz was in early March, so, he's 3 months or so out. He lost that fight. He was trying to win the UFC lightweight title, become a 2-division champion. I think anybody who watched that fight could tell that Adesanya was the better mixed martial artist of the two, but Jan Blachowicz was the much bigger guy. And they have weight classes for a reason. The fight happened at 205 pounds, but I'm sure Jan Blachowicz on the time they stepped in the octagon was 225, 230, whatever he was. I think I think the other thing we got to mention here is these two guys fought before, Adesanya and Vittori. It was really early in Adesanya's UFC career. It was April 2018. It was a fight that Adesanya won via split decision. When that fight happened, everybody thought Vittori was fighting over his head, and Adesanya's performance was a little underwhelming. So here we are, 3+ years later or so. I'm going to take Vittori. There's enough value here for me to make an outright stand. The one thing I've been extremely impressed with Marvin Vittori is, one, his ability to string together combinations, and two is his pace. He just torched Jack Hermansson, and I would have said before I saw that fight that Jack Hermansson probably had one of, if not the best cardio in the middleweight division. He was a guy who just wore his opponents out. Constant movement, constant pace. And honestly, Vittori made him look like an amateur. It wasn't close. And I don't know if he'll be able to do that to Adesanya because Izzy's so technical. But I have enough faith in Vittori's constant ability and constant ability to land with consistency. My main concern is, one, the technical difference. Obviously, Izzy's, with his kickboxing background, is one of the greatest strikers in the history of mixed martial arts. But I think Vittori, if he's going to win, is probably going to win via decision. And when there's a decision with a reigning champion, we've seen it time and time again, you have to legitimately win. If it's close, these judges, it gets screwy. They usually tend to slide with the guy who already has the belt. So if Vittori's going to take a decision, I think it's going to have to be a clear-cut decision. If you told me somebody's going to win via stoppage, I would probably go with Adesanya. So if we're looking at something where the odds are identical, I might take Adesanya, but there's enough plus money in this situation that I think it's worth rolling the dice on Vittori.
To get Jon's full breakdown and read his article, click the link in the video description below and try Rotowire free for 10 days. Go to rotowire.com/try.
Try Rotowire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.